Coming.
Hello, my name is Gerard Dache, and I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. I'd like to welcome you to our annual meeting of the Emerging GovTech live stream that we do, hosted by the Government Blockchain Association. Also sponsored by the United Nations Internet Governance Forum Dynamic Coalition on Blockchain Assurance and Standardization. Let me just take a moment to tell you a little bit about the series, then we'll get into the topic here. But before I do, just want to let you know that this stream is actually goes out across LinkedIn, YouTube, X, or Twitter, whatever, Facebook, and is spread out on a whole number of different platforms. So please feel free to jump into this thing. It's the second Tuesday of every month at the same time. You can find it on the GBA events page on our LinkedIn page. So please feel free to join us. Today we're going to be talking about real-world assets. Money reimagined, and this is catching a lot of attention right now. There's obviously a lot of stuff happening at the U.S. Congressional and policy level. It's a massive area of interest. So we're going to be talking about that. But before we get into that, I want to just make a couple announcements. The GBA, along with the Edge of Company, is hosting an event called the Future of Money, Governance, and the Law. This event will be on Capitol Hill. We're bringing policymakers from around the world, innovators, different people in the space, legal experts, regulation, technology, and we'll be spending a day on Capitol Hill with these folks. We're probably going to have somewhere between 450 and 650 people together meeting on a variety of different venues. So if you have not checked out that event, you can go to the GBA website and find information there at gbaglobal.org. We'd love to see you there. Also, I want to tell you a little bit about the blockchain maturity model. We'll probably be mentioning that a couple times throughout the event, throughout the series today. The blockchain maturity model is an assessment framework to help governments and investors and folks in industry be able to trust blockchain solutions. There's a lot of concern about blockchain projects that haven't met up, a lot of fraud and corruption. The blockchain maturity model is a mechanism to deal with that. So organizations can go through an assessment process, they can get published. It is showcased by the United Nations Internet Governance Forum as a global standard to be able to trust blockchain solutions. So you don't know anything about that, please check that out. And on the same topic, if you're looking for a blockchain solution and you don't know where to start, on the GBA webpage underneath resources, you'll find the Web3 directory. It's a drop down on the main menu. And anybody that has a blockchain solution can submit their solution so that government members around the world can find it, or other folks. We do a variety of vetting depending on the level that you show up on the list. And we share that information with GBA government members in over 500 government organizations around the world. Our sponsors on their CES networks, I'll be talking about them in a few minutes. But if you're looking for a blockchain solution, the Web3 directory underneath the resources menu in GBA, the GBA Global is a great place to start. I also want to let you know that the GBA is working on a report called Preventing Government Fraud, Waste, and Abuse with Blockchain. And that report will be published in October. We'll be releasing it at the event on Capitol Hill and throughout our global channel. So if you're interested in that topic, then please send an email to support@gbaglobal.org, and we'd be happy to talk to you about participating in that report and the distribution. Our next live stream is going to be on September 9th. We're currently looking at changing the topic. I think the topic that we're going to land on is basically data centers and DePIN, decentralized infrastructure. So by all means, please join us September 9th. You'll find the details on the GBA LinkedIn page. All right. Before we get into the discussion, I just want to tell you a little bit about our sponsor. I want to thank CES Network for sponsoring this. CES is the first layer one blockchain delivering a comprehensive AI-driven data infrastructure for Web3 and AI. They're also one of the first layer ones to go through a BMM, blockchain maturity model assessment. During that assessment, we took 1 to 2 weeks to look under the covers, look behind every rock, or under every rock, behind every tree, to really examine it. That they came out with flying colors. So CES is really tackling the tough data challenges in government and enterprise. They're dealing with really solving problems like security, privacy, sovereignty, performance, really in one decentralized platforms. And one of the reasons why this is so important to government is their features, which include millisecond level data access, geofenced nodes or geofenced node location. This is important because if you've got a blockchain solution in the government, let's say it's for voting in elections, right? There are laws that prohibit your data to go outside that geographic location. So being able to geofence nodes is a very, very, very important feature in a blockchain solution. And that's part of what CES networks do. They also have a blockchain-based data recovery. CES empowers governments and innovators to really securely store, manage, and even monetize their data, right? So anyway, if you haven't checked out CES networks, go to ces.network. It's a phenomenal infrastructure. They did launch a token not too long ago. And so if you're interested in investing in or being part of that, feel free to look them up and do your own due diligence. But we're big fans of tech, and I know the team. They're just a great organization. So again, CES Network, thank you so much for supporting this live stream and just all the work that you do. All right. Now, before we get into the topic, we normally do a sort of a news brief. And there's an article that was literally just published, and we were fortunate enough to have the author of that article join us today, 𝗠cie𝗱𝗲𝗍𝗲𝗍. So he just wrote an article called Tokenization Ethics, Coding Justice or Injustice. And I've got to say that when I read this, I thought that I was reading or listening to a conversation that my wife and I had several times, right? So what he does in this article, he draws on real world case studies, and he really compares and contrasts the ethical applications, and using very specific examples. And one of the things that my wife and I have talked about is there's a battle for the soul of blockchain, right? And that battle is between the forces that essentially want to control, right? There's an old saying that the new gold is data, right? To control, to exploit, to take away from people. And on the other side, the competing force is moving towards a world of decentralized governance. And this article, it's by 𝗠cie𝗱𝗲𝗍𝗲𝗍, called Tokenization Ethics, Coding Justice or Injustice, is just a great article. So we'll probably talk to 𝗠cie about the article, or I'm sure he'll share a lot of his thoughts with us about that. But it's a great read, and it really sort of sets the stage for what we're talking about today. All right. So and if you look at the questions that he addresses in the article, right, that's why the blockchain maturity model is so important, and that's why the future of money governance and law is so important, because we need to define what are the characteristics of a blockchain solution that allows it to be trusted. And once that happens, how do we meet with people around the world to let them know about these standards and to facilitate the adoption, so we can live in a world. And I'm going to quote Scott Sternetta, one of our guests today. Right, Scott asked the question, right, when he in the early 1990s, when he saw the world was going digital, he asked himself, what would it be like to live in a world where you couldn't trust the digital data? And the work that we are doing together really helps us answer that question, so that future generations will live in a world based on governance, right, as opposed to out of control I guess. So anyway, please feel free to read that article. Let me take a minute to introduce our speakers today. And Jiminy Crickets, I am super thrilled about this. So let me start. I mentioned Scott. Let me start with Dr. W. Scott Sternetta. Scott is one of the founders of blockchain, He's one of the, he and his research partner, Stuart Hayward, put the first blockchain into production in 1991. They wrote a paper called Timestamping a Digital Document. And like I said, he was plagued with how do we trust our digital records? And so, and I wish we had time to tell the story. It's a fascinating story. You can probably hear it on other GVA YouTube videos. But he walks through that story. But he's known as essentially one of the founders of blockchain. He then went on. He does a lot of things. He's got a PhD in physics from Stanford University. He served. I don't know if he's currently serving, but I know he has served as a partner and chief scientist for Yugen Partners. And in that capacity, tokenization is one of the things that they looked at. They looked at, do we invest in this? Do we not invest in it? What are the use cases? What, so he really had a chance to dive deep into the topic that we're talking about today. And then he's also gone on to work on his current project, which is SureMark Digital, which really protects teams, clients, and reputation by verifying identity before trust is lost. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that before we're done. And you might have an opportunity to see how you can trust the information that we're putting out here. Let me move on to Joshua. Right, so Joshua Blanchard, he's a seasoned technology architect whose work bridges public sector operations and innovation. He's the chief technical officer at Blackwallet Limited, a GBA member, and his, in all full disclosure, his CEO, I think he's a CEO, is a good friend of mine. Blackwallet is also a great company. I can't tell you all the things that they're doing because there's non-disclosure issues, but hopefully Scott, as we talk today, can share some of the projects. But they're really doing cutting-edge stuff in the area of tokenization. And so that's a little bit about Joshua. And then Enrique Esnar, the author of the article I talked about, he's the co-founder of RealFund, a Spanish company specializing in real-world asset tokenization. RealFund has successfully navigated the Spanish fintech sandbox under the supervision of the CNMV, right, which is the Spanish securities regulator. Enrique's he's got so many things that he's involved in. It's hard to kind of put him into a bio. And when I was looking for his organization and title, he's a lecturer at the IE University, IE Law School. He's just involved in so many things. But his vantage point really is from a global perspective, from a legal perspective, innovation. He understands the market practice coverage, and just brings a great perspective. So these three thought leaders provide a really powerful blend of technical innovation, public sector implementations, academic rigor, and regulatory insight. And so I couldn't be any happier. I couldn't be more thrilled than bring them together. So let's bring our speakers to the stage, and let's question. So, Joshua, I'm going to throw this to you, right? Because you're the guy that actually gets his hands dirty doing this. But what is tokenization, and what does it mean to tokenize an asset?
Well, tokenization is essentially representing something on the blockchain. The blockchain has a myriad of uses that even outside of cryptocurrency and what we talk about with tokens, but there are programs that are specifically designed to represent a thing, whatever that thing may be, and it could be a bit of currency, perhaps, or it could be a receipt. All of those things representing a fact on the blockchain would be a token.
Excellent. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on that question? Did Joshua get it right? Did he miss anything, Enrique?
Well, he didn't. I would like to add a few reflections here, because as Joshua said, I mean, a token is a digital representation of something in the real world, and if we ask what can be tokenized, probably everything can be tokenized, and we have seen a huge activity in the tokenization front, to the point that today it is estimated that 25 billion of assets are being tokenized, or in a different way, the value of the tokenized assets reaches 25 billion US dollars. So the thing is, well, anything can be tokenized. The question that perhaps we can discuss through the conversation, and I'm sure we are going to do, is why? Why do we want tokens? What do they bring to society? What do they do to make the world a better place to live in? And perhaps we can elaborate a little bit on that throughout the conversation. Thank you.
I wonder if I could take just half a step back for those that are listening that may not be as up to speed on this as others. And that is, when we talk about putting data on the blockchain, perhaps a useful non-technical metaphor is, imagine an enormous blackboard, one that is so large that a huge crowd of people can see what is up on the blackboard. And if you list an entry on this blackboard, then everyone in the audience can see it. And so it makes it very difficult to get away with putting a false entry on the blackboard or changing something on the blackboard without everyone seeing it. The blockchain that's a visual metaphor for what the blockchain is accomplishing. We have trust in the blockchain and a token placed on the blockchain simply because all of the world is effectively a witness to it, and any changes or attempted changes made that are not acceptable to this audience are immediately detected. That's how we transfer trust to the broadest possible community, rather than the need to just have some entity whose practices are in secret that just says, just trust us. The token is sitting there, the asset is tokenized. Instead, by placing things on the blockchain, all the world is witnessed to that particular token that represents an asset being placed on the blockchain.
So I'm going to represent sort of skeptics, right? Because I talk to a lot of people, both advocates and skeptics, and myself included. I'm a skeptic from sometimes. So Scott, you just really kind of led me into the next part of where I want to go to, is how can we be sure that a blockchain really makes our assets token? It's still part of what is it? What is tokenized assets? And so Joshua, Scott laid out very clearly that we're going to write this thing on the blackboard. In fact, the idea that they came up with in 1991, right, was to, as part of it, have the data be community witnessed, right? But that thing that's written on the blackboard, we talk about asset-backed tokenization, right? So if somebody says, hey, this token it represents this gold or this money that I have in the bank or something, how can we really be sure that that asset written on a blockchain, right, that everybody can community witness, actually is backed up by a real world asset? Or is that, how can we trust it?
Well, I think the best way to explain that would be to refer to the accounting practice of a ledger. And in a ledger, we trust that the last person that wrote something wrote the correct thing, was accurate. What the blockchain does that really makes everything work at all, every entry relies on a cryptographic, it has a cryptographic reliance on the previous entry, which has a cryptographic reliance on the previous entry. As long as the entire blockchain network is in sync, any one part of it was compromised and wrote the wrong entry, the rest of the blockchain network would see, because those entries are all dependent. And the way that's accomplished gets into cryptography that's probably beyond the scope of this, but people like Dr. Stonetta have created that framework and implemented those technologies in a way that we can rely on, just like we rely on our browser to be secure when we're connecting to our bank online. Those principles apply here. And so if everything relies on what came before, then anything that is incorrect becomes anomalous. There are still security issues around how we interact with the blockchain, but the blockchain itself is fundamentally secure in that way.
So it's important to understand that you can be assured that the record hasn't changed, right? That the ledger entry hasn't changed. It's authentic. If anybody tries to falsify the ledger, then that would be detectable. But there are constraints and limitations that you got to trust what's being put on there in the first place, that there is some connectivity there.
Right. So if I were to write something to the blockchain, I could write any factoid bit of information, but of course you would have to trust that I had the authority to say that in the first place. And so we have ways of, the same way we prove our identity cryptographically in the first place, everybody else can see and verify who wrote that. And as long as you know that that was me, had my name signed to it, essentially, no one else can have the same identifier, cryptographically speaking. And so you have to have that association solid in the first place. You have to understand that just because someone's name is on it doesn't mean that that's who wrote it. But if we can cryptographically prove who we are, which we do as by the way we write it, and as long as other people are aware that is exactly the right thing, that's who wrote it was who we knew wrote it, we can be sure that everything that had their signature on it was indeed from them.
Excellent. So I just want to sort of wrap up this portion here a little bit. So the blockchain does a great job of making sure that the information we write on there is correct. Well, not correct, that it has not been altered, it has not been fraud.
Correct.
Right? There's still a requirement to make sure that it's correct, right? And that also sort of drops into the whole concept of tokenization, right? So in order to trust it, you got to make sure that the tokenomics, I guess, right? All of that stuff. And by the way, the Government Blockchain Association has a blockchain maturity model supplement on tokens, actually written by Joshua's peer, Chris Smithmeyer, that if you need to trust a token, right, the BMM token supplement honestly is your roadmap for being able to trust a token. It lays out all of the characteristics that you need to look for. So please check that out. Let me throw this over to Enrique. We've been talking a lot about tokens. What are the different types of tokens? And so if I could ask the panel, Enrique, why don't you get us started off? There's a lot of different tokens. What are the types of tokens?
Yeah, thanks, Gerard. There are different classifications of tokens. And by the way, the BMM supplement on tokens has a very interesting classification. I would summarize I would classify them in three areas, right? Tokens that are that represent the underlying asset, right? For example, a non-fungible token that is an artwork, right? We have tokens that represent rights or can be used to acquire rights or services, right? For example, tokens that you use to pay for a service that you receive online. And then a third type of token would be a security token, which is a financial instrument, a token that represents a financial instrument. Then they all have different uses, and they need a different type of protection to those who buy them. And then this is what makes things a little bit complicated as to how many types of tokens, what are tokens for, and why are we issuing these tokens, or why are we buying these tokens.
All right. Anybody else have anything? Scott, you and I last night talked about NFTs and the different types of tokens. Anything you want to share, Scott?
Well, again, I think this has been well presented by Enrique and Joshua previously, but I just want to reinforce that a token is simply an entry on this giant, and I'm regretting that I called it a blackboard because you can immediately erase things on a blackboard. I'm going to change my metaphor if I could. Think of it as a giant whiteboard, and what you write on it is with a permanent ink marker. So a token is simply an entry in that ledger or universal whiteboard. And it can represent money in one form or another, or it can represent rights that are associated with the holder, or it can actually represent the underlying asset. And just to elaborate on Enrique's point, just to make it concrete, let's say it's a hotel property and there are 10,000 shares in the ownership of the hotel. So there can be 10,000 tokens represented on this ledger or non-erasable whiteboard that say, I own 1/10,000th of this hotel property.
And so I think that it's important to understand, and Enrique is an expert on this as well, that the type of token that it's classified as is really super important from a legal and regulatory perspective, right? There's security tokens, there's utility tokens, right? And Enrique, you want to just mention of these different types of tokens, what are some of the legal issues around the type of token?
Yes, I think I would like to mention first that tokenization is something that can really, and it is really changing the way we live, the way we buy, the way we invest, the way we transact, right? And then one of the problems we face with tokenization is that regulation until recently has not been particularly clear. And then we lived for a while with this idea that, okay, blockchain and tokenization is not regulated, so we can do whatever we want. And then we saw that in 2016, 2017, and 2018, many businesses or many ideas were actually funded by tokenization. So companies or businesses or groups of people, not even incorporated, were launching tokens, and people were buying tokens, and that was great, right? Needless to say that more than 80% of those projects failed or were scams, right? But then what happened? That the regulator said, okay, guys, but this issue looks like a financial instrument. And then even if there is no specific law to regulate tokens, we have the securities regulation, right? So this thing that looks like a financial instrument is subject to the securities laws. So we are going to look into this, and actually we are going to investigate, and perhaps we are going to find some people, right? Because even if we don't have specific regulation about tokenization, there is regulation that applies to things that are being tokenized. So securities laws apply to a type of tokens that have some characteristics of securities. But then we have consumer law, right? Consumer laws, I said that one type of tokens are the utility tokens that can be used to buy products and services. Okay, there is no specific, or there was no specific utility token law or regulation. Now we have some regulations, particularly in the European Union. And it is now clearer that some regulations on securities apply also to security tokens. But this was a big challenge in the past. Regarding NFTs, for example, the non-fungible tokens, it is very easy to issue a token that you say that represents ownership on a piece of art, but you need to respect the intellectual property rights of the artist, or you need to make sure that the artist is able to collect some royalties from the token, and so on and so forth. So some of the challenges that I see are probably not even legal challenges, are consciousness challenges, right? Why are we tokenizing? What are we tokenizing? And how are we going to abuse the rights of other people who may have vested interest in the underlying asset, and that we are not respecting that? And I think that this is one of the problems, one of the challenges, because regulation is catching up, particularly in certain parts of the world. And as I said, Europe has regulated the utility tokens. It is making clear that security tokens fall under the securities regulation, and so on and so forth. Other parts of the world are also regulating that. But I think that the main issue here, the main challenge, is those who are issuing the token. what is it that they are trying to achieve, not respecting existing regulations that may not be specific for tokens, and also the consciousness of those who buy those products, not realizing that they are not protected or that they may be buying nothing because the token represents something that is not supposed to represent. So I think that there's still a long way to go regarding the understanding of what this tokenization thing is, and that's why I'm so happy that GBA is launching this series so that we can discuss about these topics.
Enrique, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, especially around the 2016, 2017, when it was very unregulated, and how everybody jumped in and people were launching tokens and making millions of dollars, and then they were essentially going bust, and the meme coins, right? And yet at the same time, you've got people who are really trying to do something good, and other people that are really taking advantage and scamming people. That's real in our industry, right? That was real in the 2016, 2017. And then when the NFTs came out, you remember how people were selling NFTs of their artwork, of their music, of everything. This was a huge boom, right? Huge increase. Are we there again? Are NFTs is this a passing fad, right? Is it real? How does that play out?
I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I will jump in here because what happened with the NFTs, it was again abused by some people who found an opportunity to make a lot of money out of something that was not really worth it, right? And I believe that NFTs are something beyond Bored Apes things and other things that didn't really have any value. I think that the opportunity for NFTs is tremendous, right? For example, museums like the Uffizi in Italy are using NFTs to fund art restoration, and they guarantee authenticity, right? NFTs can be a wonderful way to ensure provenance of artworks, for example. Universities may issue NFTs, diplomas, or diplomas as NFTs that cannot be forged, right? We've had here in Spain recently some scandals with ministers who claimed that they had a degree and they didn't have anything. So they had forged their degrees, or they had claimed things that they didn't really have. So there are a number of very interesting applications in Rwanda, for example, where an NFT can represent directly the property, not a right over the property as in other parts of the world, and this gets a bit complicated. But you can transfer the NFT and you're transferring your property, right? In countries that don't operate the land registry, where people don't really have a title on the land they own, an NFT can resolve many things. They can actually get funding from the NFT, right? They can get the equivalent of a mortgage by leaving the NFT representing their property as a collateral. I think that NFTs, tokenization in general, as I said, but NFTs can really change the way people live. I mean, we have more than 2 billion people unbanked, right? I think that NFTs can really bring a number of solutions. Probably we don't have time to mention all of them, but I think that the problem is not what the NFT does. And as you said, abuse on tokenization or any other use of the blockchain is very visible, and people think that all this is scam. And yes, there are lots of scams, but there is a tremendous opportunity to use blockchain for good. And NFTs are not necessarily a fad, are something that I believe is extremely useful. And this is an opportunity. They are an opportunity for people to apply them to their needs and get their needs resolved. Identity, for example, it's another session if we spoke about identity. Can you imagine that you are a refugee from wherever, Syria, and you don't have any way to identify yourself because you have lost your passport, you have lost your university diplomas at home. You cannot really identify. You cannot really be yourself. If you have a token that actually justifies that you are who you are, and as Scott said, it is immutable, it is permanent, it cannot be manipulated. This changes people's lives for good forever.
Yeah.
If I could just briefly, because Enrique's, as he's listed these things, starting with artwork, but talking about real estate, talking about identity and whatnot, I feel like there's a train that's gaining speed and we're all kind of enthusiastic about this. But I want to ground this, if I could go back to the NFT and art situation, just to stand as a second witness that, yes, there was a kind of NFT artworks bubble that grew and then popped a few years ago and has unfortunately given a whole range of these tokens a bad name, a bad reputation. But I think we should clarify that. First of all, I am extremely optimistic about the positive use cases for this, the non-scam use cases. But what we're really talking about before we go over to real estate and identity and all of these other interesting applications, just to think about the art issue. The fundamental point to me is that artwork will increasingly have a highly digital component to it. And art brings great value into the world, but the artists need to have some mechanism for being compensated for the great value that they create. And quite frankly, it's very difficult for me to even imagine how that's going to happen without putting these tokens on a blockchain, a universal, immutable, community witnessed record. And so I think the prospect for art, serious and legitimate art, being tokenized is there is no turning back. This is the way it's going to proceed. And whether you attribute value to a Bored Apes NFT, that's a personal matter, but there will be great art. The artists will need to be compensated in order to keep the whole ecosystem going. And it is hard for me to even imagine a non-blockchain based NFT style system for managing that. It may take on a slightly modified form from the earlier NFTs, but it's here to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh, I want to hit you specifically, but I just want to make one real comment because there's something I want to ask you about, but I'll give you that chance. But I just want to let you know that I personally identify with the whole issue of art because a number of people have told me throughout my career, they said, Gerard, you're a real work of art. So anyway, so I can really identify with that. Joshua, the floor is yours for whatever comment you'd like to make, and then I got some specific questions for you.
Yeah, just to clarify for people that may not really know what an NFT is underneath. We talk about being used for art, we talk about being used for real estate, but how is that the case? When we talk about tokens, we divide between fungible and non-fungible. Fungible means that there's a representation, there's a number assigned to an identity, and if you have a $1 out of $1,000 of that currency contains, then that's a fungible token because $1 is as good as another. A non-fungible token is a one of a kind, so to speak, just like your receipt when you make a purchase at the store is one of a kind. It says that you purchased this thing at this time, and the store attests to that. An NFT is essentially a cryptographically verifiable receipt, which is a powerful concept. It's an attestation of something. That attestation is whatever is contained within. When we talk about monkey pictures as NFTs or art as NFTs, the typical use case has been it's just a receipt. And that's what a lot of people didn't understand is that I bought this art piece. Well, you have a thing that says you bought the art piece. And as long as that artist is only selling one of those, that is a testament to the world that you're the one that bought it. which a lot of people really like and I think is great, but it could also test a lot of other things. We could embed information in there that says, for example, you bought the house at 102 Brillo Lane. There are all kinds of things we can do with that, and those can act as passes, so to speak, just like you could have a numbered ticket that says you have a seat D2 in the theater. Your NFT could act as a pass to many things, and that was an advantage that of the 8 pictures that wasn't really talked about. The people who had those had access to log into a forum where they could talk to other people who had bought their 8 pictures, which I can't say was of great interest to me, but it was an actual utility attached to that token. And there are a myriad of use cases that we haven't even thought of just by saying that something a company attests to publicly that is cryptographically verifiable that a person can carry around, it can't be forged. The things we can do with that are innumerable.
Excellent. So listen, I guess the answer is that this is not a fad, right? That this is big, it's wide, it's encompassing. Joshua made me think of the comment that I made a while back that it's not even so much that we don't know all the answers, we don't even know the questions yet in terms of how this. And we'll talk about sort of reimagining money in a little bit, but it's really a point of imagination. So look, I want to go to our next topic, right? What are some of the real world challenges and examples? And to a bunch of you guys, I know we talked about real estate. We'll get to that in a second. Josh, I want to give you a chance. I recognize that you can't say specifically what you guys are doing. And I know I told you earlier that I want to make sure we have specific examples. But Blackwallet is involved in a lot of tokenization projects. Can you at least share, again, not giving any specific names or information, could you share maybe the broad categories of stuff that you guys are actually tokenizing?
Yeah, so I think the most common example of real-world asset tokenization is perhaps a thing that you have a quantity of. You could have a gold mine, and you said, I have this many shares of the value of this mine, and so I'd like to sell those. How do I sell those? Well, you can go through a lot of regulation, which this needs to be a regulated space, but the regulation isn't just about what you can do, it's also about how you do it. And blockchain simplifies the how so much and takes a lot of the cost out of doing that kind of thing. So you could have 1% of a gold mine, for example, but we go past that at Blackwallet, and we don't just look at a physical thing. We also look at things like, what about your future profits? What percentage of your future profits can be sold as a portion? And so we tokenize that. Any aspect of your business that could have value if you were willing to sell it on the market is something that you can tokenize. Also, you have voting rights. Your share of a certain asset could determine your voting rights of something. And so those are the kinds of things we look at broadly, not just what do I have that I can piece out, but how can I represent my business in a way that is quantifiable, that would be of value to all kinds of people.
Awesome. So let me throw the question over to Scott and then Enrique. What are some of the real world challenges and examples of how asset tokenization might make an impact?
Sure, I'm happy to take that as a starting point. Just Josh most recently, and I think Enrique as well, simply mentioned the efficiency of the process. There's a certain small percentage of people that will try out something new, such as tokenization of real world assets, simply because they're enamored of the technology. They think it's really cool. They want to be on the cutting edge, which also is described as the bleeding edge, and you can see how cutting and bleeding go together. But the vast majority of people could care less what the underlying technology is. What they want to know is, what is the concrete benefit of doing this via blockchain as opposed to the way that it's been done in the past and currently? And so what they're going to care about is, well, we can move this asset around more quickly. we can move this asset around more inexpensively. We can move this asset around or treat this asset knowing that there's less chance of fraud. Okay. And finally, it should simply have, just to get pointedly specific, it should have a simple, easy to use interface for doing all of that. And those 4 opportunities or friction points are really what's going to define the adoption and mainstreaming of the tokenization of assets.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then also, just as a reminder, Scott and 𝗠cie𝗱𝗲𝗿𝘁𝗲𝗱 Digital, Scott, when you essentially authenticate data, do you do that through a token?
Depending on how you define a token, short answer, yes.
Yeah. So just so that everybody's aware, when you write data to a blockchain, you can use a token. You don't have to use a token. And like Scott said, it's somewhat definitional. But again, just a reminder, check out 𝗠cie𝗱𝗲𝗿𝘁𝗲𝗱 Digital and the work that Scott's doing. It's really important, I think, for society in general. Enrique, talk to us a little bit about it. What are some of the real world challenges and examples of how asset tokenization makes an impact in those challenges?
Well, as we said, tokenization brings tremendous opportunities, right? For example, if you are a farmer in Kenya and has a crop or the expectation to have a crop, right? You can tokenize the crop, sell part of the token so that you get some cash, but you can also get funding by putting the other tokens as a collateral, right? This brings the farmer in Kenya a tremendous opportunity to get money while he has still not sold his crop, right? I have very good friends here in Spain that are doing something similar in Mexico and Colombia with coffee producers, right? Obtaining funding for coffee producers. This is changing the lifestyle of these people there. However, this also gets some challenges, as you are asking, right? What are these tokens? Are they securities? Where are they going to be sold? What is the protection to the buyer, right? Scott mentioned an interesting example earlier about the hotel that is tokenized, and then you can buy 1/10 of the hotel. Well, depending on the jurisdiction you are in, you could buy 1/10 of the property of the hotel if the token can represent the property, can represent the asset, right? Or in countries like Spain, where the token does not represent the asset, it represents a right over the asset, which is slightly different. In Spain, we operate a land register. So you may buy the token, but if you don't have your property rights registered at the land register, then it may be that you are not protected if somebody else registers the property rights in the register. So we have this conflict where we can have a duplicity of registers, right? One, the blockchain register, this Blackboard that Scott spoke about, and the land register that may not be compatible. And that creates tremendous challenges, right? Because you don't want to buy a token, even if it is registered in blockchain, that does not grant you property rights registered and recognized by the property register, right? This is an opportunity for scammers to get rich and get people poorer, right? So what's the solution here? Well, we can then create a company as a special purpose vehicle that acquires the asset, and then you can now tokenize the shares in the company and sell them, right, lawfully with the protection that the mercantile law provides to shareholders, right? Mm-hmm. Again, these are some of the challenges that we find throughout different countries, because regulations are not aligned, we operate different systems, right? For example, in Rwanda, as I mentioned earlier, yes, you could buy a property by buying a token because you don't need registration. And in Spain, you would not be able to do it.
Yeah, and so let me just talk about a couple examples of this. So you mentioned Rwanda. I know that Medici Land Governance is doing work in Rwanda. They're a GBA member. They're also listed in the GBA's Web3 Emerging Tech Web3 directory, right? So Medici Land Governance is a great example. They're doing a number of things besides what you mentioned in Rwanda. They also worked in Baltimore City. And one of the things that they did is they put vacant housing on a blockchain, right, in order to find a way to improve affordable housing for folks. Another company that I think people can take a look at is Propy. I hope I'm saying that name right. And exactly what you're talking about. They've essentially digitized the whole experience so that people can fractionalize the ownership, right? And what you're doing there is you're now releasing capital that was tied up before, right? And Propy, by all means, check out Medici Land Governance in the Web3 directory. We should talk to Propy to get them listed there as well. But one of the things that, as we'll talk about a little bit more, and I'm just going to put a pin in it when we talk about reimagining money, is we can now unlock stored value in assets, right? So you might have a car, right? And you could fractionalize the ownership of a car or artwork. Incidentally, I think it was Scott, to your point, art has always been one of the places where money launderers essentially launder money, right? We know that it's basically casino, gambling, and art and again, they're great professions, but bad actors have used that to money launder. It creates a convenient way for them to do it. And in fact, one of the GBA members, they got their first blockchain maturity model assessment was a company that supports casinos, right? And what was happening before is the regulators couldn't necessarily trust the tax revenues the revenues were being recorded accurately and taxes were being paid. So they built a blockchain solution. It's called Access is the name of the company. They built a blockchain solution that every time somebody pulls the handle on a slot machine, it writes data to a blockchain, right? So when they submit their compliance reports, the regulators can check every transaction to verify that it's authentic. And so now the regulators for those companies don't have to lean so heavily because they can trust the blockchain for their solution. Anybody have any parting? I mean, I think we've talked about a number of the different real world challenges and use cases. Let me, I'll just mention just a couple of carbon credits, right? Asset-backed stablecoins. So Joshua, you guys I know are doing a lot with essentially asset-backed stablecoins. Look, a lot of these things it's a double-edged sword, right? It gives us a great capability, but it also provides an opportunity for bad actors to do bad things. So one of the things that these tokens will allow people to do is to get around sanctions, right? Now, depending on if you sit in the U.S. IRS or FinCEN, right, or whether you're sitting, in some other part of the world on the other side of that, you might like or not like that, right? If you're a woman in Iran, right, and you want to do certain things in the business, but the government won't let you do it, right? Or anyway, we know real world stories of people working in governments that essentially are very oppressive, and they're essentially trying to do stuff, whether it's religious or whether it's humanitarian, and these tokens, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good and for bad. And Enrique, that really goes to your article. And something my wife says all the time is we need good people in this space, because if not, there's a war for the soul of blockchain, and this thing is growing, and we need people on board that can use it to find good solutions. And it's got to be a balance. It can't be 100% anarchy, and it can't be 100% control. We've got to find that right balance, and that's the hard part that I know all of you are working in this space. So let me leave this topic with you, Enrique. What are the legal and ethical implications of real-world asset tokenization. Let's go there, and then let's talk about what are the problems with money and how we can reimagine it. But yeah, any sort of, we've already covered a lot. So anything we didn't cover in terms of legal or ethical issues that we haven't touched on already?
Well, I think that the key is not only related to blockchain or tokenization, is that there is an opportunity for society to develop consciousness and act in the right way, not only in the legal way, by the way, right? Because not everything which is legal is ethical, right? But starting from there, the main challenges that I see, apart from what I said about abuse and opportunity, is that we need to make sure that we consolidate these principles of transparency, right? That when we tokenize or we do anything within the blockchain, but particularly about tokenization, that we show the governance, that we describe what the risks are, what are the value flows of the assets that we are trying to sell to people, or the tokens that represent assets that we are trying to sell to people. In some cases, we need consent from different stakeholders, right? I cannot tokenize an asset that belongs to you, Gerard, without your consent. Or if Joshua is an artist, I cannot tokenize an asset that belongs to Joshua. Scott was very clear about the need of artists to actually be rewarded for their work, right? So we need to take into account all these elements. I'm not going to talk about specific issues or specific legal issues, as I mentioned earlier, consumer protection, data privacy, and all that, because that's a little bit boring. But another thing is, how do we resolve problems? I mean, yes, we are using this technology. It is great. We don't need to trust the seller or the parties, but I mean, well, we can actually introduce some elements that make sure that we are protected, that we don't pay without actually making sure that we receive what we are paying for. There are a number of dispute resolution solutions that are great. Some very sophisticated, some very simple, but this is going to be a tremendous booster for e-commerce internationally, for example. Then if we talk about sustainability, right, you mentioned these carbon credits. This is a tremendous opportunity to actually provide access to people who are interested in acquire some of these credits, and then we can serve to some social, cultural, environmental goals. So I think that, yes.
Those are excellent points. I want to do one thing. We're running short on time, so I want to do one thing. I want to share, again, I want to thank CES Network for contributing to this, making this possible. Let me share with them a little bit of information about CES Networks, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap it up. So if we've got the video queued, let's go ahead and let people know a little bit about CES Network.
Ever wondered how CES keeps your data safe? Let's take a quick tour. CES uses amazing blockchain technology and a layered architecture to keep your data secure and private. Its CES protocol suite has 3 magical layers. The blockchain service layer, ensuring network security, scalability, and decentralization, plus performance. The distributed storage resource layer, making data storage smarter. The distributed content delivery layer, delivering data at lightning speed. Of course, you can also take a look at this image. Meanwhile, the CES AI Agent Hub brings in the coolest AI technology, enabling ultra-secure, privacy-preserving collaborative model training across the network. When you store data on CES, it gets broken down into tiny encrypted pieces distributed across the network. Only after you authenticate can you retrieve and reassemble those pieces, keeping your data private and secure during the process. CES also has powerful technologies like proof of data reduplication, PODR², multi-format data rights confirmation, MDRC, and proxy re-encryption technology, PRATE, giving your data top-notch protection. Join us and unlock the new potential of data with CES. Follow us to explore endless possibilities.
All right. So again, thank you to Seth for doing that. We do have a hard stop in about a minute. So unfortunately, I wish we could get to the final 2 points, but I don't think that we can. But it's been a tremendous conversation. Real quick, if anybody wants to reach Scott, Enrique, or Joshua, you should be able to get to them on LinkedIn. Hopefully those links have been dropped in periodically. If not, send an email to support@gbaglobal.org and we'll get you in touch. But Scott, Enrique, and Joshua, thank you so much. And remember, we'll be back here the second Tuesday of every month. Go to the GBA LinkedIn page for details. We'll be posting that up sometime, hopefully the next week or so. So thank you, everybody, for just a tremendous talk today. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.